Ahoj a vítaj pri novom podcaste Chcem sa učiť. Ja som Andrea, lektorka anglického jazyka a dnes si budeme čítať knihu Robinson Crusoe, už druhú časť. Čiže ak nemáš ešte vypočutú prvú časť, utekaj naspäť do starého podcastu, vypočuj si to, aby si neprišiel o ten príbeh a o tom, ako to začalo, čo sa vlastne stalo, lebo stalo sa tam toho dosť a môžeš počúvať tým pádom ďalej. Čo sa týka novej slovnej zásoby, tu nájdeš na našom blogu na stránke www.chcemsaučiť.sk, kde máš napísané anglické slovo, výslovnosť a aj slovenský preklad. Prípadne, ak sa ti to ťažko počúva a chcel by si to aj vidieť, ťukni si na YouTube, aj na YouTube sú tieto podcasty a zapni si automatické titulky. Tam si to môžeš spoločne čítať so mnou. Poďme teda na to, poďme na pokračovanie druhej kapitoly a prečítame si ešte aj tretiu kapitolu. Ak si dobre pamätáš, tak v minulej kapitole Robinson išiel na more, bola búrka, jeho loď stroskotala, teda nemal veľa šťastia. Potom išiel na druhú plavbu, kde ich napadli piráti a kapitán si ho nechal za otroka. No podarilo sa mu ujsť na malom člne aj s jedným chlapcom Zurim. Tak poďme ďalej, pretože teraz sa plavia a snažia sa nejako prežiť. For about 10 or 12 days we sailed on south, down the coast of Africa. Then one day we saw some people on the shore, strange, wild people who did not look friendly. By now we had very little food and we really needed help. We were afraid, but we had to go on shore. At first, they were afraid of us too. Perhaps white people never visited this coast. We did not speak their language, of course, so we used our hands and faces to show that we were hungry. They came with food for us, but then they moved away quickly. We carried the food to our boat, and they watched us. I tried to thank them, but I had nothing to give them. Just then, two big wildcats came down to the shore from the mountains. I think they were leopards. The people were afraid of these wildcats, and the women cried out. Quickly, I took a gun and shot one of the animals. The second wildcat ran back up into the mountains. Guns were new to these African people, and they were afraid of the loud noise and the smoke. But they were happy about the dead wild cat. I gave them the meat of the dead animal, and they gave us more food and water. We now had a lot of food and water, and we sailed on. 11 days later, we came near the Cape Verde Islands. We could see them, but we couldn't get near because there was no wind. We waited. Suddenly, Zuri called to me, "Look, a ship!" He was right. We called and shouted and sailed our little boat as fast as we could, but the ship did not see us. Then I remembered the guns which made a lot of smoke. A few minutes later, the ship saw us and turned. When we were on the ship, the Portuguese captain listened to my story. He was going to Brazil and agreed to help me, but he wanted nothing for his help. "No," he said when I tried to pay him. "Perhaps one day someone will help me when I need it." But he gave me money for my boat and for Zuri too. At first, I didn't want to sell Zuri as a slave after all our dangerous adventures together, but Zuri was happy to go to the captain, and the captain was a good man. "In 10 years' time," he said, "Zuri can go free." When we arrived in Brazil 3 weeks later, I said goodbye to the captain and Zuri, left the ship, and went to begin a new life. Chapter 3. The Storm and the Shipwreck. I stayed in Brazil and worked hard for some years. By then I was rich, but also bored. One day some friends came to me and said, "We are going to Africa to do business. Why don't you come with us? We'll all be rich after this journey." How stupid I was! I had an easy, comfortable life in Brazil, but of course I agreed. And so, in 1659, I went to sea again. At first, all went well, but then there was a terrible storm. For 12 days the wind and the rain didn't stop. We lost 3 men in the sea, and soon the ship had holes in its sides. "We're all going to die this time," I said to myself. Then, one morning, one of the sailors saw land, and the next minute our ship hit some sand just under the sea. The ship could not move, and we were really in danger now. The sea was trying to break the ship into pieces, and we had very little time. Quickly, we put a boat into the sea and got off the ship, but the sea was very rough, and our little boat could not live for long in that wild water. Half an hour later, the angry sea turned our boat over, and we were all in the water. I looked around for my friends, but I could not see anybody. I was alone. That day, I was lucky, and the sea carried me to the shore. I could not see the land, only mountains of water all around me. Then suddenly, I felt the ground under my feet. Another mountain of water came, pushed me up the beach, and I fell on the wet sand. At first, I was very thankful to be alive. Slowly, I got to my feet and went higher up the shore. From there, I looked out to sea. I could see our ship, but it was wrecked, and there was nobody near it. There was nobody in the water. All my friends were dead. I was alive, but in a strange wild country, with no food, no water, and no gun. It was dark now, and I was tired. I was afraid to sleep on the shore. Perhaps there were wild animals there. So I went up into the tree, and I stayed there all night. Chapter 4. A New Life on an Island. When day came, the sea was quiet again. I looked for our ship, and, to my surprise, it was still there and still in one piece. "I think I can swim to it," I said to myself. So I walked down to the sea, and before long, I was at the ship and was swimming round it. But how can I get onto it? In the end, I got in through a hole in the side, but it wasn't easy. There was a lot of water in the ship, but the sand under the sea was still holding the ship in one place. The back of the ship was high out of the water, and I was very thankful for this because all the ship's food was there. I was very hungry, so I began to eat something at once. Then I decided to take some of it back to the shore with me. But how could I get it there? I looked around the ship, and after a few minutes I found some long pieces of wood. I tied them together with a rope. Then I got the things that I wanted from the ship. There was a big box of food, rice and salted meat and hard ship's bread. I also took many strong knives and other tools, the ship's sails and ropes, paper, pens, books, and 7 guns. Now I need a little sail from the ship, and then I was ready. Slowly and carefully, I went back to the shore. It was difficult to stop my things from falling into the sea, but in the end, I got everything onto the shore. Now I needed somewhere to keep my things. There were some hills around me, so I decided to build myself a little house on one of them. I walked to the top of the highest hill and looked down. I was very unhappy because I saw then that I was on an island. There were 2 smaller islands a few miles away, and after that only the sea. Just the sea for mile after mile after mile. After a time, I found a little cave in the side of the hill. In front of it, there was a good place to make a home, so I used the ship's sails, ropes, and pieces of wood, and after a lot of hard work, I had a very fine tent. The cave at the back of the tent was a good place to keep my food, so I called it my kitchen. That night, I went to sleep in my new home. The next day, I thought about the possible dangers on the island. Were there wild animals and perhaps wild people too on my island? I didn't know, but I was very afraid. So I decided to build a very strong fence. I cut down young trees and put them in the ground in a half circle around the front of my tent. I used many of the ship's ropes too, and in the end, my fence was as strong as a stone wall. Nobody could get over it, through it, or round it. Making tents and building fences is hard work. I needed many tools to help me, so I decided to go back to the ship again and get some more things. I went back 12 times, but soon after my 12th time, there was another terrible storm. The next morning, when I looked out to sea, there was no ship. When I saw that, I was very unhappy. Why am I alive, and why are all my friends dead? I asked myself. What will happen to me now, alone on this island without friends? How can I ever escape from it? Then I told myself that I was lucky to be alive, lucky to have food and tools, lucky to be young and strong. But I knew that my island was somewhere off the coast of South America. Ships did not often come down this coast, and I said to myself, I'm going to be on this island for a long time. So, on a long piece of wood, I cut these words. I came here on the 30th September 1659. After that, I decided to make a cut for each day. Tak, máme tu koniec. Ak si to vypočul celé, si super. Ak si vypočul predošlú knihu celú, si úplne úžasný alebo úžasná. Chválim ťa, veľmi ťa za to chválim. A verím, že sa ti to páčilo. Určite mi nechaj spätnú väzbu, daj mi like, ak sa ti to páčilo. Nech viem o tom, že reálne vám to nejakým spôsobom pomáha, lebo to je také moje palivo, ktoré ma núti robiť to stále a neprestať s vytváraním takýchto podcastov. Tak verím, že sa počujeme na budúce. Choď sa učiť angličtinu, nielen týmto podcastom, rob ďalšie veci, ktoré ti môžu pomôcť k tomu, aby si sa zlepšila alebo zlepšila. A určite sleduj náš Instagram chcemsaučiť.sk, kde sa spoločne učíme, ak tam náhodou ešte nie si. A počujeme sa teda ešte raz na budúce, teším sa na teba. So, see you later, alligator.